Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this media briefing on what is a very busy Saturday afternoon for most, as it is the last Saturday just before Christmas. However, the government deemed it necessary to address a number of important economic-related issues. Therefore, the minister in the Ministry of Finance, the Honorable Ryan Strachan, will address those issues and then speak to some questions from the media. Minister Strachan?
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon to all Barbadians. I know that we're all busy making our last-minute preparations for what I hope would be a very safe and enjoyable Yuletide season, but I felt it was important that I bring to your attention a number of matters that are of importance, particularly at this holiday season, to reinforce the messages that we have sent all year, and to give you what I hope will be a bit of good news at the end of this presentation. What I wanted to first address is the matter of some bit of misinformation, which certainly has continued to galvanize and gain pace within the context of the last few weeks. And I can only reinforce to Barbadians that no matter the circumstances that you may face, that the decisions that you make with your own personal finances are important, and the extent to which persons may seek to lure you into some scheme, I think we need to be able to exercise some restraint with respect to that matter. And just rest assured that the government of Barbados will be seeking to ensure that wherever these scams, schemes, whatever are perpetrated, that we will try as much as possible to be able to find these persons and to be able to have them brought before the law courts. And I speak specifically in relation to story, fake news, whatever you want to call it, in relation to over the last few days that sought to associate myself with some type of scheme called Bitcoin generator or something of that sort. And whilst I can say to Barbadians that Bitcoin is a legitimate form of cryptocurrency which is used to be able to help leverage digital assets, I want to assure Barbadians that first and foremost, I have no knowledge of anything in relation to Bitcoin generator. As far as I'm aware, it is false, and the extent to which persons, whether it is pyramid schemes or the like, these schemes are designed in some way to be able to give some measure of credibility to the exercise. And I know that at this particular Yuletide season, that persons will want to be able to provide an environment for their families and to be able to see where they can get resources from. I really want to encourage Barbadians not to provide any information to any of these entities that are seeking to somehow associate, not just with myself, but certainly other members of government, where we have seen memes being circulated in the public domain on various social media platforms purporting to promote issues of grants or anything of that nature, that the precise intent is to be able to capture your information, to be able to use it certainly to your detriment. And I can only strongly encourage Barbadians not to participate in any of this activity, because the intent really is to defraud and to defraud you of whatever monies you may provide to these entities. And I really want to encourage you to desist from these things. But the reality is that we are faced with an environment where increasingly going forward, we may see more and more of this type of fake news and fake presentations of wealth schemes. And I know that the pandemic has had a significant impact on the livelihoods of all of us, and I would want that persons exercise as much restraint as possible, no matter how your personal financial circumstances may be. I want to encourage you not to fall for these schemes. I know that yesterday, for example, marked 21 months since the first case of COVID-19 was recorded in Barbados. And all of you are well aware of the significant fallout that has been brought to bear with respect to the international cessation of travel, as well as the introduction of public health measures that certainly we've had to pursue in order to keep you and your family safe over the last 21 months. And the government has been able to respond in a way to not just businesses, but certainly to the circumstances of individuals. And we have done so in a manner that has been quite disciplined. And I want to assure Barbadians that the public policy of this government has always been very much people-centered and focused on how best we can create a space for us, as well as the rest of the society, to be able to make it through this global pandemic. We have been successful in being able to keep as many businesses as we could open, in spite of the fact that we've had to introduce public health measures. We have been able to manage in a very significant, under a significant set of circumstances, being able to manage the public health side in terms of the response vis-a-vis the business response. And I can say to all Barbadians that we have been very focused, certainly within the context of the Ministry of Finance, working with the Ministry of Health and the rest of government, in trying to navigate an environment which has become quite significant and challenging with respect to maintaining the quality of lifestyle that we have all become accustomed. And I believe that we've been able to do a very good job at doing that in spite of the challenges that we have faced as a country over these past 21 months. We have had to respond in a very specific way to ensure that we can maintain the provision of public health services in this country in the way that we know it. And we took a very early decision with respect to the financing of the Harrison Point facility and the adoption of specific policies in order to ensure that the normal provision of services throughout the healthcare system as we knew it prior to COVID could continue whilst we deal with the pandemic. And the reason that I want to specifically point that out is because if we had to accommodate the patients that are in isolation within the normal QEH facility, that would have displaced a number of Barbadians from being able to seek the health care within that institution. And therefore we took a very significant decision that we wanted to make sure that we can preserve for Barbadians and those who may visit or others who may live in Barbados, that we can preserve that as a matter of priority, and therefore we took a specific decision to be able to move in that direction. Now, I will say that whilst the Ministry of Health and their team certainly have done a wonderful job at trying to keep Barbadians safe, it has come at a cost. And the extent to which I know that Barbadians have been very patient, very cooperative with the protocols, the reality is that as the variants become more and more transmissive, it means then that we have to allocate more resources to be able to finance the cost of that delivery of care as it relates to COVID-19. And therefore, I want to continue to urge Barbadians, certainly over this Yuletide season, that as the numbers have reduced significantly from what we would have seen 6 or 8 weeks ago, I really want to encourage Barbadians that as we move through this Yuletide season and we want to gather, and certainly we want to encourage families to gather and gather responsibly, that to do so as safely as possible so as to put us in the best possible position to be able to manage the costs associated with the pandemic. But I go further. I believe that if we can do this and do this well over the course of the next 8 to 12 weeks, I believe that we can give certainly Dr. Ford and his team at Harrison Point and the wider healthcare professionals a welcome respite with respect to being able to manage this pandemic. And I believe that it is within us as Barbadians to be able to bring this pandemic under control in Barbados by, one, continuing to access the provision of vaccines which we have been able to acquire, and to continue to follow the public health protocols, which the combination of all will truly allow us to be able to cope with living with COVID, because this government has been able to signal to the rest of the country that COVID certainly as a marathon means that we must live with it. We have seen and heard of new variants emerging globally, and therefore this pandemic will be with us for some time, and we have to be able to live with COVID, and hopefully we're able to get back to some level of normality as we see going forward. What is particularly challenging is that we continue under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, to remain faithful to settling a lot of the arrears that we inherited as a government. And it is important to remember that in all of what we have been doing, we have had to increase our expenditure to respond to the pandemic, not just from the medical side, but certainly with respect to the provision of significant relief to thousands of Barbadian families over the course of the last 21 months, which certainly was warranted, it was necessary, and we felt it was important to ensure that we can keep ordinary Barbadians, families, and households as solid and to be able to get through this pandemic as safely as we can. And the government is committed to continue to provide those resources until such time as we can get the economy to recover fully in order to get back to normal service. We are not there yet because we are still having, we still have a curfew in effect, and to the extent that there is a curfew in effect, it means then that the number of transactions that are eligible to be conducted still remain limited, and therefore the full economic recovery is not yet in hand. We are very confident that with the increased level of arrivals of tourists and our families coming back from overseas who have not been with us for 2 years at least, that with those increased arrivals to our shores, we are confident that if we as Barbadians continue to follow the public health protocols, continue with the strong vaccination drive, that we would be in a position to remove the curfew, and then therefore obviously allowing for more economic activity and means more jobs becoming available as quickly as possible, such that we can get back to some semblance of normality. And we have been able to continue to settle arrears that we have inherited, approximately $45 million a month, which we still have to continue until September 2022. And we are very clear and very conscious that there needs to be order within the context of the public finance management, and we continue to do so. And I know that there's been some talk recently about the way that we have introduced the legislation to establish the Series J bonds. But let me just take this very quick opportunity to say to Barbadians that in January of 2020, the Minister of Housing brought to Cabinet a paper that identified that there was still some $312 million in compensation that was due with respect to land acquisitions. And in January 2020, we had already started from April 2019 to start to pay that $45 million a month that I referred to earlier. And at that time, we felt that it would have been a bit of a stretch given the Series F bonds that we issued to settle these outstanding arrears, that it would have been doable to spend the extra $10 million a month from April of 2020. It would have been tight, but we felt, given the nature of the economy in January 2020, that if we started in April 2020 to settle those, that we would have been able to get through given the growth prospects that we anticipated. And therefore, obviously, once the pandemic hit in March and everything galvanized from there, it meant that we had to re-engineer our plans. We had to respond immediately, obviously, to dealing with some of the social pressures as they fall out as it related to the pandemic. And therefore, we have spent, certainly over the course of the last 21 months, those monies that we had initially had planned effectively to be able to settle those land acquisition and other claims that were brought to Cabinet's attention to be able to settle within the context of the original BERT program and the Series F bonds that were meant to be settled by September 2022. Now, we have done well, but I have not yet found the talent or the know-how to be able to spend the same money twice. And therefore, over the last few weeks, we passed through Parliament a specific arrangement that would replace the Series F bonds, which will help us to be able to settle those long-standing arrears for Barbadians that have been left unpaid for far too long. And therefore, I want to give the public of Barbados the assurance that the government has put in place a mechanism to continue to settle the debts to Barbadians. We have been able to do so throughout this process in spite of the fact that we lost $600 million in revenue last year, which is effectively $50 million every month. And therefore, we continue to be disciplined with respect to honoring commitments to Barbadians. And this government will continue to do so in the context of us being able to keep the faith and to maintain the credibility with Barbadians with respect to ensuring that people are paid. And this is important because at the end of the day, if the government cannot honor its commitments to its people, which this government has made every effort to do, then that means that we would have lost the trust and the faith that has been placed in us, and we are committed to be able to ensuring that we can settle that. So I hope that with the actions of these governments being credibly known, that Barbadians will get the confidence that we have continued to respond to the needs of Barbadians in a very extraordinary set of circumstances facing the country. But in spite of that, we have been able to meet the commitments that has befallen us, in spite of the fact not just the pandemic, but we had the ash fall, which we had to provision for. We had the Hurricane Elsa, which we had to provision for. And all of this contributed clearly to the circumstances that we're in. But I'm absolutely confident that the government has taken the right policy mix with respect to responding to the needs of ordinary Barbadians, and we shall continue to do so. I'm happy to also report that certainly, in spite of the fact that we are in a pandemic and we've had to respond to those things, we were not in a position to honor the refunds of income tax by October 2021 for last year, as the law requires us to do. But I'm happy to report to Barbadians that over the course of the last 2 weeks, we have been able to put $47 million in refunds of both of tax refunds as well as income tax, reverse tax credits back to Barbadians in spite of the circumstances that we are facing. And that is the kind of discipline, ladies and gentlemen, that I hope that would be appreciated, because this has not been an easy road by any stretch of the imagination. And we are confident that with the relaxation of the curfew and that with the cooperation of Barbadians, that we can move through this Christmas season into the new year with a new buoyed hope of optimism. And I knock on wood, as you can see me here, because I know at this time last year, we were all looking forward to the end of 2020. And then obviously 2021 did not start in the manner in which we had expected. So I really hope that we can move through this process and get to a next stage of reasonable comfort and to be able to enjoy time and some rest and relaxation and reflection with our families over this Yuletide season. Having said that, I want to share what I believe is some good news with Barbadians. And I'm happy to announce that given all that we have been able to do over the last few months to respond to people's needs, and I know that it has been a tremendous strain on families, on households, on businesses. And we've been very conscious that we have been in a very constrained environment. And the government has always been ensuring that we can balance, as I said before, the public health response as well as the economic side in order to help people get through this process. And in spite of the fact that we still have our commitments to honor, I'm happy to announce to Barbadians that on Monday, December 20th, 2021, there shall be a VAT holiday in Barbados. The specific objective of this is to provide an ease for consumers who certainly have faced 21 months of significant economic challenges, as you know, solely due to the pandemic. Now, what this will mean is that on that day, consumers in Barbados will see a 17.5% reduction in prices for those goods that attract VAT, and hence will give them an opportunity to be able to stretch their budgets some more as we go into this Christmas season. I would want the public to note, though, the following conditions, just for absolute clarity with respect to this exercise. Sales that are eligible, only goods are eligible for the VAT holiday on Monday. Eligible goods must be available for sale with immediate issuance or delivery to the consumer on the day. Orders for goods that are not in stock do not qualify for the VAT holiday. We are very conscious that obviously even at this time, even though we have put the reverse tax credits back out, that the income tax refunds have gone back out, and that payday for public servants certainly was on Friday, we know that there were some issues with respect to the delivery of some pension checks. With that in mind, hire purchase sales are eligible for the VAT holiday because we are conscious that not everybody may have the ready cash to be able to make purchases at that time. So hire purchase sales are eligible for the VAT holiday. Credit purchases or goods on consignment are not eligible for the VAT holiday. Motor vehicles, guns, ammunition, cigarettes, and alcoholic beverages are not eligible for the VAT holiday. And the supply of accommodation is not eligible for the VAT holiday. So just to recap very quickly, only goods are eligible. Eligible goods must be available for sale with immediate issuance or delivery to the consumer on the day. Orders for goods that are not in stock do not qualify. Hire purchase sales are eligible to facilitate persons who may not have the ready cash to make purchases at the time. Credit purchases or goods on consignment are not eligible. Motor vehicles, guns, ammunition, cigarettes, and alcoholic beverages are not eligible. And the supply of accommodation is not eligible. Just to go through a few administrative arrangements for which businesses ought to be aware who will be participating in this exercise. And this is really for the account sections of the said businesses. Companies or businesses who will file their VAT returns as usual, but record zero-rated supplies for that day, i.e. the business will enter the items on the VAT return as zero-rated sales in line 105. This will allow the BRA to track the amount of sales and VAT foregone for that day, ensuring a risk-based approach for auditing purposes. In filing the VAT, a company must provide sales data or receipts specifically for the VAT holiday. Companies will have to issue a tax invoice to the customer with the value-added tax recorded at 0%. And as the supply is zero-rated, the recovery of input tax is permitted, as the business will be allowed to recover the VAT initially paid on the items. We believe that this really represents a win-win for both the consumers as well as businesses, given the circumstances that we have been experiencing over the past 21 months. Certainly, I wish that we could do more, but regrettably, we still have unpaid bills to be able to settle, and the extent to which we have been able to continue to provide for other matters in relation to the pandemic is important to be executed. So I want to, at this time, take the opportunity to wish all Barbadians a very happy, special, and safe Merry Christmas, and certainly all the best in 2022. And I will take some questions from the media if they so desire at this time.
Thank you very much, Minister. And joining us from the media, we have Barry Allen from Nation News, Wendy Burke from CBC, and I see Sharon Austin Gilmore from GIS. Your questions.
Good afternoon, Minister. Barry Allen here from the Nation. It's not often that I hear you speak on public health matters, but having spoken about the pandemic and the way it has affected us, I do have a question to pose to you, knowing you're not a representative of the Ministry of Health. But can you tell us if at a cabinet level, the government has started to discuss any possible tweaking of our entry requirements? As you know full well, Barbados will be hosting a tour that is going to attract thousands of visitors from our main source market, Britain. And at the same time, that same source market is dealing with a significant surge of COVID-19 cases associated with the Omicron variant. At the moment, our entry requirements do not, persons coming don't need to do anything outside of a PCR test. do we expect some tweaking to our requirements very soon or before that cricket tour does commence?
Thanks very much for that question. And I can say to you that the Ministry of Health and the COVID unit has been, on an ongoing basis, as you well know, been issuing guidance as it relates to entry requirements for Barbados. The extent to which there is the significant spread of the Omicron variant in the United Kingdom, the Ministry of Health is responsible for monitoring and determining what would be the entry requirements. But let me indicate that whilst the concern is real with respect to what is happening in the United Kingdom, we have had to, or we have, in a sense, moved to a stage where we must recognize that living with COVID means that as these variants arise, that we must do all within our power to protect ourselves and our families. And I would want to take this specific opportunity to remind Barbadians again that the more that we can do to protect ourselves within our spaces and how we conduct ourselves, and I must congratulate Barbadians for allowing us to get back to some reasonable level of numbers and comfort as we have over the past couple of weeks. And I hope that that can continue certainly going forward, but it means that we must take the initiative to be able to get vaccinated, continue to follow the protocols, such that whatever measures, Barry, that the Ministry of Health puts in place with respect to visitors coming, that we are in a position to actually execute these events, for lack of a better term, in a way that is safe for everybody. COVID is here to stay, regrettably. We hope that it certainly will become endemic and hopefully go away. But the Ministry of Health is constantly monitoring. I'm confident that in terms of what they have done so far in order to help us to be able to get through. And I am sure that whatever measures may be required to participate, that they will so do. You would notice that over last week, the CMO announced provisions with respect to how we will deal with events in Barbados. And therefore, I see that as an opportunity for us to be able to test, if you like, our capacity to be able to manage events as we resume. And I think that with that type of approach, that once we get to a stage where with cricket and whatever the requirements are for the execution of the cricket, that I'm confident that once persons are vaccinated and that we continue with whatever testing regime we put in place, that we will minimize the risk, not just of the risk of the transmission of the disease. And once persons are able to protect themselves, then ultimately our hope is that persons do not get significantly ill, and certainly we hope that persons don't die. And that is why we have been continuing to encourage Barbadians to get vaccinated and to follow the protocols.
And a quick follow-up question, Minister, in terms of Monday's initiative, is this going to be a one-off, or can Barbadians expect to see something like this in between probably Easter?
Barry, at this particular point, we have been monitoring all that we can do, and I can't say to you that this will happen again soon, but we are comfortable that we are able to give some relief to Barbadians in this way, very very limited, given the income circumstances that we have. I think if we're able to successfully get the economy fully reopened, and I'm just very conscious that a lot of persons are still not working 40 hours a week. They're still not working full time. So it means that their incomes are still not at the level that they would have been pre-pandemic. So therefore, we are trying to make sure that whatever monies people have now, that we can certainly allow it to stretch as far as possible. If between now and April or any point in the future such is contemplated again, then it will be for obviously different reasons. But to the extent that we are committed to opening up the rest of the economy in a safe way, allowing persons to get back to full work, to a point even where they're working overtime, because overtime is a luxury these days for a number of persons, then we will be confident that the incomes will rebound, and therefore persons will be again able across the spectrum to be able to afford the the lifestyle to which we've become accustomed. And we're hoping that in managing the pandemic, that we can, and with the recovery that we anticipate, that income generation will accelerate and persons will be able to earn more money simply because of the hours, but as well as the activity that we anticipate will accompany it. So at this point, it is Monday, and obviously the government will review where required to determine what other measures may be warranted with respect to providing further relief to Barbadians.
Wendy, did you have a question? Wendy, you're muted.
Okay, here I am now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, now, Minister Strong, you spoke to the delivery of the pension checks. We know there's been some delay. I would have seen the postman out today. Can you give us any indication as to how soon we can wrap that process up? That's my first question, and then I'll go to the other.
Yes, thanks very much, Wendy. Yes, regrettably, because of the process for those persons who still are receiving their pensions by check, the outage earlier this week obviously had an impact on that. The postman, let me thank the postman for ensuring that persons can get their checks this weekend. The majority of persons, however, would have received their pensions already, who get them directly into their bank accounts. And I will take this opportunity again, as we did early in the pandemic, when more than 5,000 people out of the 11,000 that, if my memory serves me correctly, who were getting checks at the beginning of the pandemic, that for those persons who are still receiving their pensions via check, I would want to encourage you to have them lodged to your bank account such that these types of hiccups are minimized. But the postmen are out in the field delivering those checks, and I hope that by tomorrow that all will be delivered such that persons can present them either to the post offices or to the other financial institutions to encash, and then to also allow them to participate in the VAT holiday on Monday if they so desire.
Okay. You also spoke to the VAT holiday, but I remember some time back we also had a duty-free day for locals. Is there any likelihood of a return of that before the end of the year or early next year?
Well, thanks for that question. You would recall that obviously the duty-free day was very limited because not all stores in the country offer duty-free, and therefore we opted for the VAT holiday as opposed to a duty-free day, such that Barbadians will be able to access a wider range of stores than was the case during the duty-free day that we had. I can't remember how long ago it was, and as you would appreciate, that created quite a bit of congestion in specific stores in town simply because of the nature of the provision. So we've chosen to go to this wider approach to reflect the fact that the pandemic is still with us, and therefore persons can access the VAT holiday at any store that obviously charges VAT, and therefore it is consistent with the public health circumstances that we're in. People are out shopping. It's Saturday afternoon, and I know that I have some work to do at home too, and the extent to which we are all busy at this time, don't laugh, it is true. The extent to which we are all out, I think we've been trying to make sure, as I said at the beginning, that we can balance the public health as well as the economic circumstances that we are facing. So all stores will be able to offer and benefit from the VAT-free holiday on Monday.
Wendy, you're good?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Barry?
Minister, quick question. Yeah,
Sure.
quick question, Minister. Even though the government has paid out a combined $47 million in reverse tax credits and income tax, there are quite a few people in Barbados that would have been looking for their income tax returns to be with them before Christmas. They don't get the thinking that they will. You expect another surge in payments early in 2022?
Well, as I was saying, Barry, earlier, part of the reason that these income tax refunds were a little late, because as I said, the law says that you're supposed to pay by the end of October. We did have the issue with the ash, the freak storm, certainly the hurricane, as well as the summer surge, which soaked up a lot of cash that was in circulation at the time for us to be able to do these things. So the the lateness is regretted with respect to that provision, and therefore, though that 47 million really ought to settle, for the most part, the 2020 filings that were done, and we are confident that will, unless persons are still being audited, that would constitute the majority of refunds for that year. But we continue to honor refunds, as you would appreciate, within the context of the program, because, as I said at the very beginning, our focus has been trying to not just bring discipline to the public finances in the way that you might look at it from a macro perspective, but really to make sure that we can actually pay people on time as best we can. But of course, as I said, this year has been particularly challenging because of the nature of the disruption, certainly with respect to the natural disasters that we have experienced, and therefore we've had to recalibrate. But we are confident that with the reopening of the economy, as I said, and with the participation and cooperation of Barbadians, that we can get things back on track in a more streamlined fashion. But things will happen, and we will continue to pay those persons for whom outstanding refunds are due, as we have been able to do certainly over the last 3.5 years.
Any further questions, Barry, Wendy? Okay, Minister, I'll give you final comments.
Yes, thanks very much. And I really just want to reinforce the point to Barbadians that this has been a challenging year, and we have done very, very well to get to this point after the summer surge. And as we seek to enjoy ourselves this holiday season, and I certainly look forward to it myself, because my family has not had the benefit of my attention for some time. But I really want to wish all of you and your family, your friends, a very, 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 very warm, safe, and special Merry Christmas, and all the best for 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, the Honourable Ryan Strachan. Thank you, members of the media, and thank you as well for joining. Do have a wonderful afternoon.